Welcome, everybody, to the Alpha Koncepts Podcast, where we'll talk about everything going on in the gun culture from training to gear and gun rights advocacy. Hi, I'm Thomas Kroll, and I'll be your host for this adventure. And in today's episode, I've got two special guests on the phone with me. I've got Mark and Ralph, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges that they face as gun owners being in wheelchairs. Mark and Ralph, thank you for being with me today.
Pleasure.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, both of you gentlemen use a wheelchair from time to time?
Indeed.
Yes. I think I use mine all the time, but...
Well, yeah. You did used to walk on prosthetics?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And, I do want to thank you guys for talking about this subject. I think it's something that, people might not give a lot of thought. Obviously there are some challenges that you might face. And I just, like I said, I just wanted the world to understand that not every shooter is running around doing 3-gun, although, Mark, I know you do compete. And we'll definitely talk about that. Like I said, I want to give the world another perspective, and I thank you guys for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not often that I'm asked about this subject, and I certainly do want to get information out there, because I do think it adds perspective. Makes people think about things that otherwise they wouldn't think about, and then even from a gear perspective, it could give somebody the inspiration to create something that would be useful for our purposes that has not yet been created.
Yeah, Ralph, we're on the same page. That's exactly what I want to accomplish today as well.
Very good.
So, Ralph, we'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell the world, when you started shooting, why you started shooting. Just, introduce yourself.
I think I've always had a attraction to firearms for a few reasons. When I was younger, I just saw them as something fun. I found target shooting, target practice just challenging and just fun and rewarding. I wasn't thinking about firearms in terms of politics or any kind of use outside of recreation. I have the displeasure of living in Chicago, and so for most of my life, firearms in the city have been illegal, and only since 2013, since the CCL law passed, has all of that gotten has owning a firearm become even possible. But my actual introduction to firearms was when I was maybe 12 or 13. My father had a BB gun, which wasn't much, but again, that's what gave me the appreciation for target shooting. And then, having lived in Chicago for most of my life, practically all of it, I didn't have the legal ability to own a firearm. And then as soon as the CCL law passed, the former Chicago permit, because in addition to a FOID card, you would have, for a time, there was a requirement for a specific Chicago permit that was, one, very difficult to get, and two, very much cost prohibitive. And when the CCL law passed, that permit ceased to exist, was basically null and void. And that is what gave me the ability to finally own a firearm. I had a FOID card for 10 years before that, but didn't have the ability to do anything with it.
Yeah, so, obviously all the criminals still own their firearms, but law-abiding citizens like yourself who were just trying to play by the rules, wanted to own a gun, like you said, for recreation, but also for personal defense, you were prevented to legally possess and own a firearm in Chicago, and obviously that's been done away with. So you now are able to do that legally, and you have been for the last 6 years, approximately 7 years almost.
Yes, I bought my first firearm towards the end of 2014.
Great. And now I'm assuming, like all of us, you own many.
I own enough. I would say
Nice collection.
That's a good answer.
That I disclose, but yes, firearms have many purposes, so they're all geared. Everything I own is geared towards different goals and intentions.
That's very well said.
Like all of us, you start with one, and before you know it, you have quite a few.
Mark, what about you? I know you don't live in Chicago, but tell us about your journey.
Well, I used to live in Chicago for most of my life.
But you were smart and you moved.
Yes, I did. I got out when the time was good. Actually, like right after high school. But my gun history started way back. I was a young kid, probably 10 maybe. My father was a Chicago police officer, and I can remember the first time that he let me shoot his service revolver, a 357 Magnum, and he put 3 or 4 rounds of 38 Special, followed by the rest in 357 Magnum, and let me have the first few easy, and then the last couple were a surprise.
Yeah, I'm sure he was sitting there with a smile on his face waiting for you to find the surprise.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, after the 38 Specials had been fired, I felt his hand on my shoulder.
Tightened?
And something told me, uh-oh.
How old were you approximately?
10 to 12 years old.
That's a good age. Yeah, that's it varies from child to child, but that's a good age.
Yeah, I actually did that same trick on my wife after we got married. And after the first 357 round, she turned her head to look at me and mouthed a expletive that was directed right to me, and then she turned back towards the paper and finished off. And it was a scarily good shot too. But I had grown up, or like you had mentioned, disabled, and I wore 2 artificial legs. That was up until back in the middle 80s. I was working for a limousine company, and then a friend of mine put into my head to start my own limousine company. And this guy became a partner in my limousine company. He was a retired state police officer. And he told me that, maybe what we should be looking into was doing some armed security chauffeuring. So I went to Triton College and took a certification course for a basic unarmed, and then 20 hours of armed security. And then unfortunately found out that the insurance price was way too high and put us out of that idea. But I've always been around handguns, and then 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. Now I got my concealed carry license, and I was talking to the instructor, and it became kind of an epiphany for me that I really wanted to teach this. I had been a teacher before, teaching software packages at some retail stores, Electech and CompUSA, if anybody remembers them from years ago.
I think you're showing your age.
Yes, I'm in my late 50s. But I found out from my instructor that, I could be a firearms instructor, and I went ahead and I took my my NRA basic pistol course, and then went on and was looking for a software package to teach, and I was so impressed with my instructor that he said, maybe you should go to the USCCA. And my instructor was Chip Eberhardt.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Just to name drop a little bit, he's a fantastic guy, and he's a competition shooter that got me into competition shooting as well. But I went to the USCCA and originally became a associate instructor, and then became a full-time instructor. And, I've been teaching now for 4 years, I think.
And in fact, we got certified together to teach defensive shooting fundamentals, and you've helped me out teach that as well.
Yes, that was a great class. I love that defensive shooting class. That was everything that you need to know after you get your concealed carry. Okay, now you have your license, and what should I do now? And that was a perfect next step.
Absolutely. And
one that I highly recommend.
And Ralph, I remember at one point in time you had the desire to also take that step to becoming a firearm instructor. Have you been?
I still do, and I'm still intending to do it. It's just life kind of happens, and you have, I've got many things going on, but it's very much still a goal of mine. The primary thing that has prevented me from actively taking that step is it's not that I can't, or it's just a time restriction. It's more so, when I got into firearms, I was mentally I was prepared, and I had, although I didn't have any experience, I knew mentally what I was dealing with, that it required a lot of concentration and diligence, and I had to be aware of things. And so I was very cognizant of what I was doing, and to some extent naturally safe, if that makes sense. But I have spent enough time around public ranges to know, and firsthand, that not everybody is that cognizant and diligent and just respectful of what they are dealing with.
Amen.
The sheer power of what they're dealing with. So what has stopped me from becoming an instructor from a liability perspective, strictly tied or solely tied to my disability, is the fact that I don't know that I can stop somebody quickly enough if they're doing something dangerous. Not to say that I can't do it. I just haven't been able to come to that decision of if I can prevent somebody from doing something dangerous quickly enough to stop them from hurting themselves or others. And then along with that comes the liability insurance and all those kinds of other things that I have had to consider before I can confidently become an instructor.
Well, let me tell you, Mark helps me with my classes, and he does an excellent job controlling students. He'll even work with two at a time. And, as the lead instructor, it's my responsibility to not only watch the students, but also watch the instructors. And Mark has 100% confidence, my confidence. And I'm sure that, off air, he'd be willing to give you some tips and tricks and build up your confidence and give you a few techniques that you might want to understand. And, it's just one of those things, like you just might need to be shown the way, like riding a bicycle. It can be done, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So if you want to...
The easiest is just to have smaller classes.
Sure.
And that's kind of the way I've been doing it, because
that would be great and very much appreciated if we could talk off air. about that.
Sure.
I would certainly appreciate that.
So,
Absolutely.
Ralph, you've got your concealed carry license, correct?
Yes,
And you carry?
I do on a daily basis.
Excellent. I'm so happy to hear that, because not enough people do.
It's not something that I leave the house without, and more so, if I'm prone, I'm armed. If I'm out of bed, I'm armed.
So why did you decide to get a concealed carry license and to start carrying, on a daily basis? And let me back up and say real quick, amen on what you said about carrying on a daily basis, because not enough people do. A lot of people will, quote, I'm doing air quotes here, only carry when they think they need it. And my question is, if you thought you needed your gun, why the hell would you go there in the first place? Then I'll usually follow up with the question, do you only carry a spare tire when you think you need it? I mean, you don't know when you're going to need it. That's the whole point in carrying. So if there's anyone out there listening who is like, yeah, I only carry when I think I need it, or I only carry when I go to this neighborhood, you're doing yourself a disservice, false sense of security. Bad things can happen to anyone at any place at any time for any reason or no reason at all. Statistically, some areas are safer than others, but you are never truly ever safe. So get in the habit of always carrying. If you walk out that door, keys, wallet, phone, gun. That should be your mantra.
There is no such thing as safety. There are only levels of safety.
Right.
You are never truly safe.
Right.
Well, Thomas, too, being handicapped, we're immediately considered the weak of the flock. Like the wolves are out there, and they're culling the herd. They're examining everyone around them, and who is the weakest link? Who is the one that they can?
Who is the
take
easiest
advantage
victim?
of the easiest? Right.
Yes, and I have actually experienced that firsthand multiple times. Before I had owned a firearm and gotten a concealed carry license shortly thereafter, I had been the victim of an assault through no fault of my own. I wasn't anywhere dangerous. I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to. I'm a rather wise individual, and I try to make wise decisions. So I don't put myself in harm's way or in inherent danger. That being said, actually, I was in front of my home, in front of my house. So I'm sitting in my car. It's 2:00 in the morning, talking on the phone with a friend of mine, and a guy walks up to my window, knocks, and I thought, something was wrong. I don't immediately think the worst of people, and I certainly didn't think anything of this situation. So I rolled down the window, and that was my mistake. Looking back on it, hindsight is always better than foresight. I should have rolled down the window part of the way, asked what was wrong, and proceeded accordingly. But I rolled down the window, and this guy immediately lunges at me for my phone, fights with me for quite a few minutes, actually rips the phone out of my hand, rips it in half as he's doing so, and fortunately for me, proceeds to run away. I can only have suspicions as to why that occurred, but my suspicion would be that he was doing something that he shouldn't have been.
Like stealing your phone.
I saw him and was on the phone reporting him to the police. And so that is the only conclusion I can come to if there is a rational reason for this. There have been, I wish I could say that was the only instance. Unfortunately, it has not been. I have been the victim of road rage, where I did nothing wrong and somebody had walked up to my window and, threatened me to pull me out of the car and do various things in the way of violence. And again, fortunately for me, because those situations ended without incident, largely because the day I started, and I can't stress this enough, the day I started owning and certainly more so carrying a firearm, I learned such a respect for life. And I realized at that moment the level of responsibility that I was placing on myself willingly. And so both of these confrontations, the one that just ended luckily for me, where the gentleman or the person who walked away, certainly wasn't a gentleman, but the person had just ran away. The second was I was carrying a firearm, and I was so focused on de-escalation from my training and just through the years mentally preparing for these kinds of situations should they occur. I thought it was imperative that I would at least be mentally prepared. So through that mental preparedness, I was so focused on de-escalation that I was successful, but honestly, I didn't even think about using a firearm. Now, that is not to say that I wouldn't have had it gotten dangerous. It's not as though I wouldn't have, but it's nothing that you ever want, number one. And two, I was so focused on de-escalation and just getting this person to walk away from my vehicle without incident that I had, for a moment, even forgotten that I had the firearm there. But again, not forgotten in a way where, had it become unfortunately necessary, that I wouldn't have drawn and responded accordingly. So that was the second instance, and the third was somebody breaking into my house, or at least attempting to, and that was a real quick incident where, fortunately, just announcing myself was enough, and the person just ceased and stepped away from the door and went wherever they went. But that was the end of that. And as both of you surely know, most burglars do not want a confrontation. So fortunately, most of the time, announcing yourself in your home is enough. But those three instances are why I carry every day, even in my home.
And when you realize that 100% of home burglaries happen in the home.
Yes. And of course. And,
But that's actually missed. That's actually missed by a lot of people. They think that when they go home that they're safe,
right?
And they take off their holster. Right?
But relatedly to that, what people don't realize is that 80% of or a large bulk of their time is spent at home. So if you're going to be a victim of violence, there's actually a very good chance that within that context, it's going to be at home, because you're either, most of us were either at work or at home. And this is one of the issues as to why so many workplaces, bar firearms. They're actually making it more dangerous. You spend almost all of our time is spent either at home or at work, between the two. And so the notion of not having a firearm or not being able to have a firearm at work or at home is preposterous. It's ludicrous. It's just preposterous. It's frankly unacceptable. We have to abide by the law, but we also have to fight to change the laws, because we are actually hurting ourselves or allowing ourselves to be hurt more than anything. We're not accomplishing anything safe and anything that would be honorable.
Correct.
Well, with that, ourselves. With that, Raphael, there's a special circumstance that I actually am involved in that most places that you work, if you cannot carry, you can at least have your firearm in your vehicle. I happen to work in one of the few places where that isn't even allowed, because I work at a place where there's it falls under the Nuclear Regulatory Act. So even anywhere on site where I work, as soon as I cross the gate, there shall not be any firearms or any other weapons. And that has reared its ugly head where, because I can't have it in my vehicle, even when I go out for lunch, I'm at a disadvantage. And I've had a couple of occurrences where I've been out to lunch and have had situations where I immediately felt, this could get bad very quickly, or it could have gotten bad very quickly, and I wish I would have had my firearm with me.
And then your only option is either break the law, not even a company policy, but break the law by bringing your firearm to work, risk losing your job and going to jail, or complying with the law and placing yourself at a significant disadvantage.
And danger. A literal threat of bodily harm or death, even, unfortunately. And it's actually shocking to think about, what some employers are actually asking people to do. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I've always come back to, we just have to provide education. Most people do not know the first thing about firearms, just have no idea. So there are all kinds of myths that come into play. Oh, it just goes off by itself. Oh, this person's going to get angry and start shooting or commit violence. Or, oh, what if I see it? It's even the sight of a firearm is such a frightening and unnerving thing for people, and it really shouldn't be. Because I carry, everybody in a place where I am carrying, they're that much safer for it. And because, again, I've put time into thinking, time into training, and it's not something that I take lightly, not at all. I actually very much understand the extremely heavy responsibility that I have placed on my shoulders willingly, and that notion is something that nobody thinks about. There's this myth or this notion of people that carry guns or own guns as being unstable, trigger happy, looking for a way or a reason to use it. That could not be further from the truth. Quite the opposite is true. We are looking for, we carry a firearm, but we're always looking for ways to never use it. Ever.
Absolutely. And let's shift the conversation a little bit to gear. Mark, you don't carry inside the waistband in a holster, do you?
No, and that's because of my current wheelchair. It really doesn't give me a lot of access to a side, the 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock position holster. So, and I have been chosen not to carry appendix style. I've seen more often than I have seen more accidents happen from the appendix style carry than any other position that could at the very least be more fatal. From the 3 or 4 o'clock position, you can shoot your thigh, you can shoot your butt cheek and not die. But from the appendix, you can either damage your femoral artery, whereupon you might just have moments to live, or maybe even if you were to shoot the family jewels, in which case, even if you lived, you would probably have wished that you shot yourself in the femoral artery. So I have chosen to carry somewhat what they would call off-body carry in a non-necessarily tactical-looking fanny pack that I wear on the front.
And you mentioned off-body carry, and that would technically, most people would consider having the firearm in a bag, a fanny pack, a purse, something like that is considered off-body carry. But I've never once seen you without the fanny pack. It's like part of who you are. You always have it on you, so it's not really off-body.
Well, that's also because that's where I carry my wallet, my keys, my phone, my vape.
Yeah, your stinky vape stick.
So, it becomes an easy way to carry, because if I don't have to carry my wallet in my back pocket because I'm sitting on my ass almost all the time, it's far more comfortable to not be sitting on a bulky wallet.
Sure. And you've had to adapt how you carry as well. And you learned something, what I like to call proving your gear, when we went to the Defensive Pistol Instructor course together, Defensive Shooting Fundamentals with the United States Concealed Carry Association. You were able to, what I call, prove your gear, and realize that what you were carrying before it didn't work exactly as you thought it was going to. And when you got some repetitions and you were able to work with it, you decided to move to a slightly different style fanny pack.
Yes, well, it wasn't for lack of training, because I had trained with it, but the original fanny pack was a horizontal carry, and at least with the training, with the repetition of how many times we had to pull from the holster, I kind of realized that two things. I was putting anyone in danger to my left as I was drawing the pistol horizontally, and I just decided, I wanted to be able to find a fanny pack that I could put the firearm in vertically, so it's sort of like a appendix carry, but because it's outside of my body and the way this fanny pack is actually designed, I'm really in very little danger of shooting myself or my femoral artery or my genitalia.
Ralph, what about your... Sorry to cut you off, Mark. Continue.
But for my competition shooting, going from one stage to the next was not wise to be carrying the gun in hand when I was moving the wheelchair. So they wanted me to carry in a holster that I had mounted to my wheelchair. So that was another form of carry. So going from one stage to the next, I would have to holster, reholster, move, and for each stage, which sort of took my times down for the competition a little bit. But you still
finish in the top 30% when you compete.
Well, I'll be humble and say the top half.
Okay, which is you're better than half, right? That's good.
Right. But I was also under, for anyone wanting to get into competition, I took upon the idea that I was not going to be competing against anyone but myself. I was going to focus on making myself faster and not worrying about where I fell in the lines. And I think the only reason why I was able to score as high as I had been was because of the deficit in time that I very obviously had against able-bodied shooters. But my accuracy made up for a lot of that. So I was able to focus on making myself better each and every time. And it panned out where I was able to keep myself in the upper half and be happy for that.
What about yourself, Ralph? What gear issues have you had to overcome that you've realized may or may not work for you in your daily life?
So I initially started carrying. I've tried a couple of things. I've tried, belly bands. I've tried having the firearm holstered or mounted rather in a holster to my chair, and I'm actually thinking about resetting that up. But through a lot of trial and error, I have just come to it depends on the scenario and context of where I am and what I'm doing in the day. But I either carry inside the waistband at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock, or outside the waistband again, depending on what I'm doing. And how you carry and the method by which it's done is very much a personal decision. I have no issue with appendix carry. I've actually appendix carried quite a bit, and even so much as a full size MMP 40. I've carried at 12 o'clock, and I can still do it. It's just not always comfortable. That is the only reason that I don't do it. There are instances where it's okay for a little bit, but I used to do it 12 hours a day. I no longer can. It's just not comfortable for that amount of time. But as far as confidence in my gear, I don't worry about negligent discharges because I have confidence in my gear. Carrying a firearm is inherently dangerous. There is some. I mean, you're carrying a weapon that can harm, right? But if it's done right and done with respect in mind, with quality gear, that risk is mitigated almost to the point where it's non-existent, and that is why I don't worry about carrying appendix. But most of the time, I carry it, like I said, 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'm one of those people that, and this has been one of the challenges of being a gun owner, actually, of a few, is the fact that I am left-handed. And because I carry inside the waistband or outside the waistband even, I have come to the point where I use my wheelchair a lot more, and that has had other consequences, but I use my wheelchair more because if I come into a situation where I may actually need my firearm, then I am more effectively able to use it and handle it competently in a chair, at least from a speed perspective, because I can carry and handle it while prone, while walking with crutches. It's not that I can't do it or that I would otherwise be somehow more unsafe in doing so while I was walking. That is not the case at all. It's just that walking with crutches and carrying a firearm presents its own separate set of challenges in that, for instance, I first have to purposely and very intentionally, although carefully, fall to the ground. And only after falling to the ground do I have the ability to then draw a firearm. Because if I draw while standing, I can do it with one hand. I can, you can draw a gun one-handed and shoot it one-handed. But now, you're holding a crutch in the other hand. You can't really move. And now you can't even fall because now you've got the firearm in your hand and you're just stuck there in one position. And I would hope that it would just end there if anything ever did arise. But that is why I have chosen to, if I was ever in a situation, I first have to fall to the ground. And then I can effectively use a firearm, because now I have both hands free. I can aim the way it should be done, and from a tactical perspective, I now surprised the person that has or is trying to harm me or attack me, or however we want to phrase it. Because the last thing they're expecting, or I would think the last thing they're expecting, is for me to purposely fall to the ground. And I've now taken myself out of their line of sight, at least for a second or two. And that second or two where they're thinking, what is going on? What just happened? May be the difference between life and death.
I mean, that's a good approach. I had never thought of that. In defensive shooting fundamentals, we teach to get off the X, step out of the line of fire, and that's certainly one way to accomplish that. Obviously, it would be painful if you fell wrong, but yeah, getting off the X is definitely important in a self-defense situation.
You know, and from a wheelchair and perspective, this is one of the reasons why I am a proponent, and I know there's a lot of debate on the following subject, but this is one of the reasons why I am a proponent of open carry, to the extent that people should at least have the option. Because now, so let me kind of quickly go through the process of what
actually,
happens.
Ralph, guys, it seems like we can go on for probably another hour talking about all of this. I mean, you have each a lot to say, and it's eye-opening for me, to say the least. You've said some things I hadn't even thought about, but unfortunately, like all good things must come to an end. We're coming up to time constraints here. I want to give you each a minute to say whatever you want to say, tell the world whatever you want to tell. The floor is yours. Mark, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks for having us. This is a new thing for a lot of people to think about. We are people too, and as we age, we become more of a target. But we also can be just as safe with a firearm and to protect ourselves. And one of the reasons why I wanted to become an instructor is so that I could pass on all of these ideals to not only able-bodied people, but I wanted to also be able to help more handicapped people, wheelchairs, crutches, etc., to be able to believe that they don't have to rely on other people to protect themselves. They can protect themselves as well.
Excellent. Ralph, what do you have to tell me?
Well, Thomas, likewise, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and maybe, because this is such a deep subject, as you said, we can certainly go on for another hour. Maybe we can do a to be continued or a chapter 2, because there are other equally important things that need to be said. But sure. What I want to say to anyone listening, especially if you're disabled, is do not fall for the lie that you can't or that you shouldn't. In this context, carry a firearm. Disabled people are so often told, both implicitly and or directly, that they can't do certain things. So they start to believe those things. And so I would imagine that for a lot of disabled people, owning a firearm and more so carrying one hasn't even crossed their mind, because they may have been in situations where they have been conditioned to think, I can't. And that is a lie that could not be further from the truth. Don't let that stop you. And for everybody, disabled, non-disabled, and everybody, educate yourself. Read. Find the information. Find answers to the questions that you have, and you may be very well surprised. Talk to people who carry firearms. Do not rely on mainstream media or mainstream consensus on what owning and carrying a firearm is, and what or who the people are that choose to do so. So do your own research, do your own, seek out your own answers, and gain the knowledge that is there to be grasped.
Like everything you've said today, very well said. And everybody, you heard it. Ralph predicted it. There will be a second episode. You're going to have to subscribe to hear that. I want to thank you both for being here today on the Alpha Koncepts Podcast. Everybody who's listening, I want to, again, invite you to subscribe. Definitely go out, take a friend shooting. That's important. Let's grow this gun culture. If you want to reach me, you can go to alphakoncepts.com/podcast. As always, everybody, be armed, be trained, and be alpha.